Yes. Yes, we continue to have an issue.
Just going to wait about 30 seconds to allow folks upstairs to get settled. Mr. Manning, thank you for joining us. How are you? I'm all right. I'm all right. You see, we have a hearing room full. A number of people were bussed in. Buses are leaving at 3:30, so we're going to make Mr. Nielsen. Thank you so much for joining me. That's okay. You're right on time. Right on time. I'll gavel in now. Thank you very much for joining us.
Stay for 1 minute. Should be calling
Hey, John. How you doing?
So you're
talking about some of the public comment?
We're going to do a little of the public comment before the after the department speaks, but before item 4. And we'll just figure out the time. Good afternoon. If the sergeants would please call the remaining members of Sub 1 to let them know that I've gavelled down and we're going to get started, I'd appreciate that. We'll call today's Sub 1 hearing to order. Thank you very much. I'll like to welcome Mr. Nielsen, Mr. Manning to the hearing, and we'll give them and Mr. Chesborough and give them an opportunity, if they so choose, to have opening remarks. Would like to welcome all of those to the hearing room and those who are viewing us on Cal Channel to this very critical hearing. The subject of today's hearing is CalWORKS. The governor's proposes major restructuring of the program, including cuts of over $1.1 billion. The legislature developed a welfare reform plan and system in the mid-90s. The first purpose in the statute is to, quote, reduce child poverty in the state of California. That is the lens through which we will look at the proposals being presented today. At that time and through the years, we said to CalWORKS recipients, if you step up, we will aid your transition to self-sufficiency and will not abandon you or your children to the depths of poverty. CalWORKS is a complex system with a rich, long history in the state of California. The agenda today provides key background, and I recommend 2 additional excellent publications for those wanting to understand this fundamental program in greater detail. There's a primer that's been done called Understanding CalWORKS, which was produced by the California Center for Research on Women and Families, and then the document published by the California Budget Project, Key Facts about the CalWORKS program and the Aftermath of the Great Recession, again produced by the California Budget Project. There'll be copies of these documents available to members of the subcommittee, as well as a limited number available to the public, again, to really have a working knowledge of this very complex, very critical state-funded program. These are 2 wonderful resources. We have a full agenda today, and I want to be certain that we afford time to our panelists and all of you who've traveled from long distances to join us. Let me just go through a few kind of house rules, if you will. If this is your first time participating in a budget subcommittee hearing, welcome. We don't halter or interrupt the hearing proceedings by applause or any comments from the audience. Those of you who are familiar with American Sign Language will recognize that this is the sign for applause. So if you want to express support, something said by a witness or someone, feel free to practice your bilingualism and applaud silently, please. With that, I'll open it up to Mr. Nielsen, if you have opening remarks, and then to my additional colleagues. Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the convening of this very important hearing, and I'm delighted to participate. I apologize, I've got to leave in about an hour and 15 minutes, but I want to be here as much as I can. Welfare reform in California has a long and storied history, and mine predates 1990's effort to the original GAIN program, Greater Avenues for Independence, which I would still argue was then, and maybe still now, the most historic and significant welfare reform in America. And the fundamental premise was to allow people to become self-sufficient in society, productive members of society, and we learned many times things over the years that were successful in GAIN program, particularly the focus on education, remedial education, what was then voc ed, now called career tech ed, and transitioning individuals back in to gainful employment, not work for your welfare, but to improve your employable skills. Not a guarantee of a job, because no one can guarantee that, but a guarantee that you could be employable and that you could survive in society. I believe that that GAIN program and its successor here, CalWorks, has worked well. But one of our imperatives now, we cannot any longer in California be the most generous in America, or the magnet. So there have to be some changes. And over the last 3 budget cycles, some constructive changes have occurred in CalWorks. The governor's proposing more for us to consider. All things must be considered for sure in terms of this, but there are certain fundamental premises that I think are important, and that is about developing an ability to sustain oneself in society in a gainful way and not remain forever dependent on the state.
Thank you very much. Mr. Monning, opening remarks, or Mr. Chesborough? Thank you. Mr. Chesborough.
I'm going to say something that I've said every year for several years. It may seem a little bit repetitive, a little Groundhog Day-like, but these proposals keep coming forward, so we're having the same discussions. And that is one of my frustrations with where we are in the budget process, and it seems to get worse every year, is that, and actually Mr. Nielsen made reference to the design and nature of these programs. After so-called welfare reform, this program, like some other very important programs in state government, were designed to foster independence and help people become more self-sufficient and to save the taxpayers money. So here we got a program that was designed to give people the tools, give them the education, give them the child care, give them the other supports they needed to go out, improve their skills, and hopefully make more money than they did on CalWorks. Not always the case, I realize, but that's the goal. And I'm interested, by the way, in hearing about the education portion of CalWorks, because I think that's one of the key components to making sure that people do better. But I just wanted to, again, express the frustration that we are to the point, you know, maybe another thing that Mr. Nielsen would recognize is the phrase, farmer eating his seed corn. We're to the point where we are undermining and going after programs that, at least in their reformed version, were designed to create greater independence, greater self-sufficiency, and less dependency on the taxpayers. And so as we examine the governor's proposals, and as we have in previous years, I think we need to keep in mind that this is not intended to be a handout. This is intended to be a hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chesborough. And with that, we'll have staff call roll.
Mitchell,
Present.
Chesborough, Jeffries, Mansour, Monning.
Thank you very much. With a quorum having been established, we can go ahead and get started. We've got a very full agenda, and so I'm going to try to my best to run an efficient hearing today, making sure, however, that everyone has their opportunity to participate fully. With that said, let's get started with our first panel, the CalWorks program today. We've got 3 presenters: Mr. Ansell, Acting Chief Deputy Director, LA County Department of DPSS; Vanessa Lee, Supervising Attorney, Neighborhood Legal Services of LA County. And I know we've got a current program recipient, sir, and I don't know your name, so after the first 2 presenters, I'll have you introduce yourself. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Ansell. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. conviction to talk to you today about the reality of the CalWORKS program in Los Angeles County, which of course is the largest CalWORKS program in the state, currently serving approximately 179,000 poor families with children. The CalWORKS program in LA County, as in the rest of the state, continues to pursue two objectives: helping parents move from welfare to work and helping children and their parents avoid abject poverty. With respect to the first objective, notwithstanding the recession, we have continued to be very successful in helping parents receiving CalWORKS benefits make the transition from welfare to work. Since 2006 alone, over 175,000 parents receiving CalWORKS assistance have secured employment through the CalWORKS program. The legislature and the administration have agreed to restrict the universe of parents participating in welfare to work services in recent years as a way to accommodate the lack of funding to fully provide welfare to work services. So the universe of parents participating is smaller than it once was. Parents with children ages 1 to 2 and 2 children under 6 are currently exempt, though able to participate as volunteers. At the same time, however, for those parents who continue to participate in the welfare to work program, we've remained the robust and effective program that we first implemented in 1998. With respect to the other dimension of the CalWORKS program, the goal of avoiding abject poverty, we have unfortunately been less successful. Since July 2006, in the last 5.5 years, the number of homeless CalWORKS families in Los Angeles County has increased by 110%, more than doubled. So that today, over 11,500 families receiving cash assistance through Los Angeles County from the state of California with the purpose of avoiding abject poverty are nonetheless homeless. Lest one think that this is only because the caseload itself is growing. In fact, during the same period of time, the overall CalWORKS caseload in Los Angeles County has only increased by 17%. So the increase in homeless families has been 6 times the increase in the caseload as a whole. And if one considers the meaning of the term abject poverty, being homeless is the epitome of being abjectly poor, of being destitute. Now, the reality is that CalWORKS families principally and almost exclusively, in fact, utilize the cash assistance they receive to pay for rent. So it's not surprising that when that funding is cut, given how low it already is, that the result is that more families are pushed into homelessness. Now, in fact, during this period of time where the number of homeless families in Los Angeles County doubled, most CalWORKS families incurred a grant cut of 12%, 4% followed by 8%, and that corresponded to a doubling of the number of homeless families. I'd like to share a story with you of one family that, but for an eviction prevention program that we operate at our discretion in Los Angeles County, would have become homeless as a result of the CalWORKS reductions that were enacted as part of the current year's budget. The father, Leonardo, was the primary wage earner for his family until he lost his job in June of 2011. His wife, Sandra, cares for their 2 young children. In August of 2011, the entire family, mom, dad, and 2 children, and 5 children, were being evicted from their home because they were unable to pay rent due to the combination of the father's lost wages and the CalWORKS grant reduction that took place, both the 8% grant cut and then the family hit the 48-month time limit because of having received 50 cumulative months on CalWORKS, during many of which the father was working, but still were earning little enough that he received a partial CalWORKS grant. The family's grant declined from $941 to $731 over a 2-month period, a total of 22%. The family faced eviction, and again, as I mentioned, because we operate an emergency assistance to prevent eviction program, the family was temporarily able to avoid eviction. Their rent is $900 a month for 2 parents and 5 children. This family is representative of the more than 11,000 CalWORKS families today who are homeless in Los Angeles County. So when we consider the governor's budget proposal for fiscal year 12-13, we do so through the lens of this experience, the experience of over 11,000 homeless CalWORKs families who are helped every day by over 70 full-time social workers in Los Angeles County, funded through the CalWORKs single allocation to help them find permanent housing. Those are social workers who should be used to help parents secure employment. But because homeless families won't find work, our first job is triage, like in an emergency room. And that's what it feels like administering the largest local CalWORKs program in this country. It feels like we are in an emergency room conducting triage. So when we consider the administration's CalWORKs proposal for the coming year, we consider the proposal through the lens of this experience. And we're forced to ask the following question. Since the governor's proposal would result in a grant reduction that would generally be 27 to 41% all at once and generally on one of 2 days, or the complete elimination of the CalWORKs grant for 3/4, 74% of CalWORKs families, how much would this number of homeless families grow? If a 12% grant cut for most families resulted in a 110% increase in the number of homeless families, what would be the increase that would result with a grant cut of 27 to 41% or a grant elimination for 3/4 of CalWORKs families? Would this number double to 22,000? Would it quadruple to 44,000? Would it octuple to 88,000? There's no way to know the answer to that question unless the legislature goes along and enacts this proposal. And I can tell you most sincerely, having been involved with this program since it was birthed in this room under the leadership of Dion Aroner, who's in the room today, and others 15 years ago, that I have never been as more fearful about the possible consequences of a proposed change to the CalWORKs program as I am today testifying before you. Let me close with an analogy. If a person falls out of a boat and is in freezing water 10 feet from the boat and is thrown a 7-foot rope, that person will drown. There's something about using a cash grant for housing that's like the person in the freezing water. It's an all or nothing proposition, and it's very different than assistance with other basic needs like food. If a family doesn't have enough food assistance to eat 3 meals a day, the family can eat 2 meals a day. If a family doesn't have enough cash to pay rent for a full month, the family cannot pay rent for 20 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Lee, and I'm a supervising attorney. Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Lee. I'm a supervising attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County. If you're not familiar with legal aid or legal services programs, we provide free legal assistance in many areas of law to low-income individuals and families. Clients find their way to legal aid offices when they have a legal problem. Often they call with one issue in mind, but as we know in life, and especially for low-income families, problems do not exist in a vacuum. Though my area of work deals primarily with helping clients access public benefits, I'm here today to share examples of how our clients' lives are sustained when the CalWORKs program fulfills its purpose and its promise. I hope that these examples give you pause to consider the void that would be created should certain proposals take effect and the infinite variations of the big black hole in which these clients and their families would fall. One of our recent clients is a single mother of a teenage daughter. Our client had not worked in 5 years, where she previously held a well-paying job in real estate and enjoyed the small trappings of life, such as driving a dependable car or going to yoga class. Mother and daughter went on CalWORKs 4 years prior when our client's post-traumatic stress from a history of domestic violence with her ex-husband and a subsequent boyfriend, as well as her other mental health conditions, caught up with her. The two of them were on and off homeless. They couch surfed with relatives, depended on friends who were willing to take them in for weeks or months at a time. or even resorted to renting rooms from complete strangers. Our client applied for SSI benefits, supplemental security income benefits, but was denied, and we decided to represent her in her appeal. In the meantime, we assisted her by ensuring that she received the full benefits and services she could from CalWorks. There was absolutely no way she could work or actively engage in any activity other than mental health and domestic violence services. Personally, whenever I interviewed her, she would start shaking and crying at any question about her past, any mention of a specific date, no matter how benign, maybe a reference to a form she filled out or a day she went into a certain office, would cause her to recall any negative memories she associated with that month and that day, and again lead to a breakdown. She would tell me again and again that she needed to work to show her daughter that she could get a job and their own place and prove that she was capable of being a parent. But the very next minute, she would be a complete wreck and clearly could not do those things. The CalWorks program supported this family through those trying times, and the mental health services she received enabled us to present a stronger case for her SSI appeal. We won the hearing, and thus our client got off of CalWorks onto SSI and was able to rent an apartment of her own. CalWorks helped her through the difficult times and brought her to that stability. We also come across clients who may not be able to tell us what they need, but find their way to us when the people trying to love and care for them are desperate for help. For example, Abby was an infant when she was taken into the foster care system and placed with her grandmother. Because the Child and Family Services did not do a thorough review of Abby's qualification for federal foster care benefits, Abby's grandmother had no other way to support her other than to apply for CalWorks. Abby also had numerous health issues, and unfortunately, CalWorks benefits don't really account for those special needs. The benefits she received amounted to $351, which is the current exempt grant for one child. Fortunately, we got Abby off of CalWorks by securing retroactive foster care benefits, which also included a higher amount for her special needs. Children who receive child-only CalWorks grants do not have the voice, knowledge, or understanding to advocate for themselves and their own basic needs. Their caregivers have that charge, whether legally obligated to or not. The decrease of the child-only grant would only add an additional pressure on a caregiver already trying to make decisions regarding his or her ability to care for this child. Lastly, I want to share with you the story of a former CalWorks parent that's employed with our office as a paralegal in training. She previously worked in an after-school program as a tutor for children, and her boyfriend held a steady job. They planned to start a family together. After they had the baby, she stayed home to care for the child as well as pursued her associate's degree at a community college. The father's hours at work kept getting cut over and over again, which led them to make that hard decision and apply for CalWorks. Through the Welfare to Work program, she participated in job search and put her best foot forward in drafting and redrafting her resume, pounding the pavement to find a job, and all other requirements asked of her, but still there were no jobs out there for her. When she heard about the Transitional Subsidized Employment Program, she signed up. Her assignment was with Neighborhood Legal Services, and she worked out of our courthouse clinic helping self-represented litigants fill out forms. After a year of experience under her belt, the opportunity to work with and get to know our program as well as our staff, she was hired for a full-time position with benefits and no longer received CalWorks. We've partnered with LA County's TSE program for the past 2 years. Though organizations like NLS cannot be expected to hire every single placement, we can provide some basic skills development and work opportunities to CalWorks participants. This can only happen when the county has the opportunity to develop these types of placements and fit them in as an appropriate puzzle piece at the appropriate time in their participants' welfare to work plans. Some of our clients need remedial education and basic skills courses, often hindered by limited course offerings at the local schools and colleges before they can work in an office. Some will need a lengthier placement so that they can gain the confidence and interpersonal skills necessary for any workplace. At least in our office, we hope to assist them by getting a piece of what they need to make the county's delivery of the CalWorks program work. In closing, I just want to reflect, as a legal aid attorney for the last 10 years, I have gained some insight to the CalWorks program and the lives that depend on it, both for daily survival as well as the endeavors for their futures. Though I would welcome any opportunity to discuss how the CalWorks program can be more responsive to its recipients' personal situations and needs, I'd like to reflect on the basic elements that do help CalWorks recipients succeed. The first is they need time. With the economy and the job market as it is, most people in CalWorks have limited skills and opportunities to land a permanent job that will keep them out of poverty. Secondly, as I've highlighted in one of our client stories, is that services such as mental health and domestic violence counseling are fundamentally crucial to establishing one's ability to really get out of CalWORKs and find a self-sufficient future. This includes the flexibility for domestic violence survivors to truly heal from their past so they can create solid grounds for themselves and their families moving forward. And lastly, an acknowledgement that a single engagement process does not reflect reality. Ultimately, folks who rely on CalWORKs do not all travel down an assembly line at the same pace, and nor do they enter at the same point in their lives. Forcing them to fit into one mold as a recipient will fail to address the root problems of why they turned to the CalWORKs in the first place, and to do so with a limited time frame would further ignore that. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Our last witness in this panel is James Matthews, representing Lifetime. Mr. Matthews, thank you very much for your willingness to come and share your story in terms of your personal experience and your effort to try to find a job in the current economy, and that you're willing to step forward and share some of your personal story. Please know that on behalf of the committee, we really appreciate your willingness to do so, to really help us fundamentally understand the long-term implications of some of the policy issues that we're struggling with today. So thank you for coming. And you have 3 to 5 minutes.
You'll have to excuse me. I have never been before a panel like this before. I'm not the most polished speaker that you may have heard. I'd like to begin by reading a quote from Proverbs 29, verse 7. It says that the righteous considers the cause of the poor, but the wicked does not understand such knowledge. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I'm a father of 4 children. I have owned 3 businesses. For almost 7 years, I worked as a mortgage originator, and at one point, I enjoyed a low, comfortable 6-figure income. I have been gainfully employed since the age of 18 and started working at age 14 mowing lawns. At one point, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously while I was on active duty. I never thought I would be a CalWORKs recipient. I never thought I would be on food stamps. I never thought I would be on welfare. There was a time when I was a staunch Republican, Mr. Nelson. So please hear me. Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Morning, Mr. Chesbrough. In 2007, my dream, like many other Californians, was crushed when the real estate market crashed. I lived in the Inland Empire. We lost our home. We lost our cars. We lost our savings and our health insurance. And I discovered what it felt like to endure the pain of losing a child. My wife miscarried due to the stress. And when we sought help from the county, we were told, Mr. Matthews, you made too much money the year before. We moved from Riverside County to Los Angeles, where we now live in a 500 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment. I discovered what it feels like to be rejected for good paying jobs because I didn't have a college degree. On one hand, I was told, Mr. Matthews, you're underqualified. On the other hand, I was told, you're overqualified. I spent from the fall of 2007 to the fall of 2008 struggling desperately to find work in another field. I looked into classifieds, I went to job fairs, I visited the unemployment office frequently. I applied at websites like Monster and Job.com. I went to the WorkSource in El Monte and even to a program called the Job Club, a state-managed program, who were not able to successfully find me employment. No degree? Sorry. I remember one particular staffing agency in the city of Covina. They refused to even take my application or my resume. They had a position for an administrative assistant. When I served on active duty in the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, I reported directly to our battalion commander. I was his administrative assistant. I had experience. We had over 11 commodities in our battalion, and we oversaw millions of dollars worth of management through our office. I was filling the billet for an E6 as an E3. I had the experience for the position, but I was told it wasn't recent enough. As a mortgage professional, if you do not have an administrative assistant, you are an administrative assistant. I asked, what does an administrative assistant do? And she read me a bulleted list. And I said, just out of curiosity, would you happen to know what a mortgage professional does? I gave her back the bulleted list. She said, Mr. Matthews, the employer that has hired us to find work doesn't want you. They don't want people from your field because they consider you to be a flight risk. I told her O.J. Simpson was a flight risk. The lowest point for me was when I tried to make application for a counter help position at McDonald's. Imagine yourself, you earn a comfortable six-figure income. Imagine yourself just wanting to put milk in the refrigerator for your children and being told, we're sorry, we are looking for Spanish-speaking counter help. I served in the Marine Corps. I was born here. All I wanted was a job. Instead, in September of 2008, I became a welfare recipient. At the end of this semester, I will graduate from Mount San Antonio College with 2 degrees. One, a liberal arts degree with an emphasis in business, the other, a business management degree. I intend to transfer. This weekend, I spent the entirety of my time looking for work. I still see an economy that is bleak. I speak to students with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees that are still looking for work. Some of them advantaged. I ask you, I speak today for those who can't speak, for those who cannot be here, for those who cannot plead with you. Consider the cause of the poor. Do not slash funding to this program. There are scores of families behind me who, as this gentleman to my left very succinctly stated, are about 3 feet short of rope. If you eliminate the only real safety that exists, what will become of others like myself? Will you hear them? Will you hear me? Thank you for your time.
Mr. Matthews, thank you very much again for your willingness to come and share your personal story. You know, we know that every family, every CalWORKS recipient has a different set of circumstances, but thank you very much for painting a picture for us, a very vivid picture in terms of what your experience has been like. We appreciate you. Before we transition to the next panel, I'd like to open it up for questions from committee members. Mr. Ansell, you stated in your testimony that you represent a county, correct me if I'm wrong, with the largest caseload? With the largest caseload. Give me a sense of implementation. You know, let's fast forward and we could pretend that today's July 1, and let's pretend, for argument's sake, that the proposal passed as was proposed by the governor in January. What would that look like in LA County?
Madam Chair, I think there's 2 dimensions, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first is the preparation for the implementation of this enormous grant cut, which would be first a 27% grant cut for the families who are currently aided without an adult, where only the children are receiving assistance. And then 6 months thereafter, the preparation for the implementation of the proposed 24-month time limit, which would eliminate the adult share of the grant and result in an average 41% grant cut for those impacted families, which I would note would include families that have never participated in any welfare to work services because they may have been exempt from welfare to work participation their entire time on CalWorks. For example, they may have a disabled parent or a parent caring for a disabled child, where heretofore they have both been exempt from welfare to work participation and those months on aid have not counted against the adult time limit. Under the administration's proposal, all of those months would count retroactive to January of 1998. So one track of preparation would be the preparation for these two tidal waves of grant cuts that would happen 6 months apart. And in terms of preparing for the impact that those grant cuts would have on families, I'm frankly not sure what we could do. Our county has been enormously committed, particularly to trying to prevent and then alleviate homelessness among families. As I mentioned earlier, we have a county-sponsored eviction prevention program. We have 70 dedicated social workers. But if the basic resources to pay the rent aren't there, the county has no capacity whatsoever to fill in that gap. So in terms of how we might prepare for the sort of individual and social consequences of those grant cuts, I think we would be helpless. With respect to the welfare to work side of the program, the governor's proposal contemplates an enormous, immediate, and very temporary expansion in the number of families in the welfare to work program, followed by an enormous immediate contraction. Because under the governor's proposal, upon enactment, those parents who are currently exempt from welfare to work participation because they have a child age 1 to 2 or 2 children under 6 would immediately have an obligation to participate in the welfare to work program. But then 6 months later, most of the families with an aided adult would lose eligibility to receive welfare to work services because they are not currently at least engaged in sufficient hours of unsubsidized employment to satisfy the federal work participation rate. So if I might illustrate graphically, if this balloon is our welfare to work program, we shrank the balloon without tearing it to accommodate the $375 million statewide reduction in the single allocation and the corresponding temporary exemptions for single parents with a child under 2 and 2 children under 6. So we took the balloon and we shrank it without tearing it. Under the governor's proposal, we would have to take this shrunken balloon and dramatically expand it larger than it currently is, and even than it was before the exemptions, and then 6 months later, we would bring it back much smaller than it is now. So we would face the challenge of securing space and probably hundreds of additional welfare to work services staff for a 6-month period, and then eliminating that staff and space and contracted services 6 months thereafter. So aside from the policy dimensions of this proposal, just operationally, I think it would be effectively impossible to implement this proposal in its own terms.
And, increasing child poverty across the state notwithstanding.
Again, that's the policy dimension.
Exactly.
My response was relative to the operational challenge.
And I appreciate that. They gave us a whole new kind of perspective to understand. And that would apply across the state, not just L.A. County, which everyone likes to separate out as a standalone, but that would be the same kind of challenges counties across the state, large, medium, and small, would encounter.
I think the only distinction in L.A. County is that we have more zeros on the number of families we serve.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Hansel, I thank you for your testimony, sir, and your commitment. Yeah, you have a tough job. Would you have any suggestions for alternatives to what the governor has proposed?
Well, Assemblyman, I appreciate your question. From where I sit, it's hard to see that taking away the benefits that poor families use to pay rent is the very best choice the state can make in terms of accommodating this budget deficit. So to the extent that the question is whether there's some better way to balance the state budget than taking $1 billion away from poor families that they use to pay for rent, I'd have to say yes, though I'd have to defer to you and the other 119 members of the legislature to figure out exactly what those better alternatives are. Within the CalWORKs program, which I think may have been more the sort of gist of your question, again, the starting point is whether it's good public policy to reduce the funds dedicated to the program, and my answer to that question has to be no. So then if the question becomes, with no cut in resources dedicated to the program, are there any ways that the program could be modified that would make the program even more effective than it is today?
And that's the latter point I'm dwelling on.
I would say on that question that I think there's room for conversation. I would point to the fact that the legislature and the administration agreed in the recent past to implement temporary welfare to work exemptions for single parents with a child age 1 to 2 or 2 children under 6. I don't think anybody thought that was good policy. It was just the least bad of a series of bad options to accommodate a $375 million cut in the single allocation. I think, for example, if the legislature were to maintain the status quo effectively in terms of funding for grants and services, there could be a conversation about whether a continuation of those temporary exemptions or some other modifications to who participates in welfare to work services, whether that might, whether there's a better answer to that question on a go-forward basis than there was on what was originally a temporary 2-year plan. So I think those are the terms in which I would respond to your question.
Well, the whole thing is somewhat built on, and has been historically, incentives and disincentives. Disincentives, if you don't get about what you're supposed to do as a parent, pretty quick you're going to be off, and only your children will be in the safety net. Incentives are other things that would induce people to actively participate and do everything they can to become employable. In other words, through their training, through education, through working or whatever. Those are some of the things that have been incorporated over a period of time, some of the more recent reforms. And that's what I'm trying to get my hands on, what kind of thing. If we can minimize the reductions now, and that would always be a goal of my own personally, and I've worked as a member of the conference committee to do the best we could, because there have been proposals to wipe it out entirely. And in this very
I was
room,
less afraid, if I might say, I said earlier I was most afraid of this proposal. I was less afraid of that proposal even because it was more, even though it was more draconian, because it was clearly an impossible and inconceivable thing to do.
Sure. Well, again, we do have to grapple with some kinds of changes that will help us in the long run. And I think this is an encouragement, and as a part of the dialogue continues in the subcommittees here, the full conference committee along the way, suggestions of some long-term kinds of changes that would help constrain the growth of the program. That would be helpful. Obviously, the economy, I get that, but within the program itself, some creative or substantive ideas would be helpful to bring to the dialogue. I just would welcome your thoughts. That's all.
Thank you very much. If I might just respond briefly on 2 points. First, with respect to your comment about incentives and disincentives and the relationship between sanctions and time limits, I would point out that under current law, the only parents who reach the time limit was 60 months, would be 48 months, under the governor's proposal would be 24 months, are parents who are fully participating in the welfare to work program. It's only parents who are trying to do, who are doing what we ask of them and fully participating, who remain aided in the first place. So those are today 48 months of full participation in the welfare to work program, either in welfare to work preparation services or employment or some combination thereof. Because parents who don't participate, they get sanctioned. And in Los Angeles County, we have a very rigorous system of ensuring that people participate or they get sanctioned. And when someone is sanctioned, their clock isn't ticking. They don't hit the time limit. So what we do with our time limit is we say, you are a parent who is seeking to move to self-sufficiency. You are actively participating, and we are now going to take away your share of the grant and deny you access to welfare to work services. On the second point about what will it take to, what could we do to restrict the growth of the program? I guess the point I would make there is that the CalWORKs program was extraordinarily successful in reducing the caseload by about half in the years from when it was implemented in 1998 until the onset of the Great Recession. And the caseload has risen relatively modestly since the Great Recession took effect, much more modestly, for example, than the CalFresh program, formerly the food stamps program. So in my judgment, there is no need to modify the program to reduce future growth because the program grew in an appropriate manner in response to these macroeconomic circumstances. And as unemployment goes down from historically high levels, I expect that the CalWorks program will go down as well. And on the question of incentives and disincentives, I just have to say that if 175,000 poor parents in Los Angeles County alone got work thanks to the CalWorks program since the Great Recession began, then I think that the design of the program is extraordinarily successful and consistent with all of the best research on how to most effectively structure a program of this kind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the response to the questions. I'm sorry, Mr. Chesborough has one more question.
Madam Chair, reference was made to growth of the program, and it's my understanding that the caseload statewide is a fraction of what it was before CalWorks was implemented, correct?
That's correct. It's the caseload is far, far below what it was when CalWorks was implemented in January 1998.
And that's what I meant, at least from a taxpayer standpoint. I know there's different reasons why it's smaller, but one of them is that people have gotten jobs.
Absolutely.
And so that's one part of what I meant earlier when I talked about the taxpayers. I wanted to make a comment and then ask a question about the educational component.
Please.
The gentleman who's a recipient, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Matthews, I apologize, made reference to, either recently graduating or about to graduate. We had a witness, I think, at a joint committee. I was in the Senate at the time, who actually was a former tenant of mine, who was a CalWorks recipient, who today has a master's degree and teaches at the community college and is a homeowner. We've talked about the immediate crisis that's created for families, but what we haven't talked about is what loss there would be in terms of building income capacity through education and training that lifts people out of poverty. And I know some people are timed out and wind up in jobs that don't pay any more than they were getting. But on the other hand, there are success stories of people getting skills through educational processes. Could you talk a little bit about the impacts of the loss of those transitional opportunities that CalWorks creates for recipients?
Certainly. The governor's proposal is to deny welfare-to-work services to parents who have received 24 months in their lifetime of CalWorks cash assistance unless they're working sufficient hours in unsubsidized employment to meet the federal work participation rate, which is 20, 30, or 35 hours a week, depending on the family composition. That means that a parent who received 24 months of CalWorks assistance, even if they were working part-time during those months, even if they were exempt based on disability or disability of a child during those months, once they hit 24 months, they could never again get services to help them get work, except for 1 month of job search assistance and child care every 6 months. So I think from the way I see it is that the governor's proposal would deny access to welfare-to-work services to the families that need them the most, the families that haven't secured unsubsidized employment yet, who are actually the ones who need welfare-to-work services. And to pick up on a comment made by one of the other witnesses, the proposal seems to be based on an assembly line vision of the lives of CalWorks families and their participation in the program. The notion that a family comes in, they participate continuously on CalWorks, and then something happens. They either exit with employment or they don't. But in fact, there's an ongoing interaction between employment and CalWorks participation and the lives of individual poor families. Just to give you an example, Assemblyman Chesborough, if under the governor's proposal, if a participant applied for CalWorks in 1999 at age 19 and secured employment 3 months after coming on CalWorks, and for 2 years worked part-time and received a $100 a month CalWorks grant because they were earning just little enough to remain eligible for CalWorks, and then moved up to a better job and got off of CalWorks, and now in 2012 more than a decade after leaving CalWorks, this mom who had one child and now has two, and in the interim has been abandoned by her husband, and comes back and reapplies for CalWorks, she would be ineligible for her life, in getting any kind of welfare to work services unless she could on her own secure unsubsidized employment. So for a program whose goal it is to help poor parents move from welfare to work, to say the parent has to get work first and then we'll give you help to retain your job seems a little bit backwards to me, and in particular with respect to the very severe constraints it would pose on the ability of parents to participate in education and training.
Thank you for that very detailed answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much to the panel. We appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. We'll ask the LAO to come forward now, who will give us a review of program history and your analysis of the status of CalWorks grants.
Document from them. Do we have a document from them? Oh, she's passing it out.
Here it comes right now.
I always like to wait till the last second. Give you the documents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Chairwoman Mitchell and members. I'll be presenting Brian Euler from Legislative Analyst's Office. I'm accompanied by Mark Newton, Deputy over Health and Human Services.
Can you pull the mic a little closer to you?
Mic?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think we're having mic issues generally today, so folks could sit close to the mic. It's either mic issues or I'm losing my hearing. I'm not sure which.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'll be presenting from a handout that you should all have in front of you. The handout was prepared at the request of the committee. As Ms. Mitchell has indicated, we'll be reviewing some recent history of the program and providing some context on the current level of cash grants. You see in the first few pages of the handout, we provide some brief background on the program, which I won't be speaking to directly, but provide some reference for your discussion today. What I will be speaking to is 3 items. The first is the status of work participation in the program. The second is a summary of the recent budget cuts in the last 3 years. And the third is, as I mentioned, providing some context on the current level of cash grants in the program.
Great, thank you.
Turning to page 4 and the first topic, which is the work participation status in the program. The largest source of funding for CalWorks comes from the Federal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, block grant. A requirement of receiving the full TANF block grant is that the state meets certain federal work participation requirements. More specifically, able-bodied CalWorks recipients, 50% of able-bodied CalWorks recipients are required to participate in some categories of work activities. The state can receive caseload reduction credits, which reduce this requirement based on reductions in the caseload in recent years. As you can see from the figure at the top of page 4, California's work participation rate has been about in the mid-20s for most of the past decade. And up until 2007, when a recent federal change significantly reduced our caseload reduction credit, we were meeting our federal work participation requirement. But since that time, we've been failing to meet our federal work requirement. The reason why this is important in the budgetary context is that the ramifications of failing to meet the work requirement is the possibility of federal penalties, which are the reduction in the state's TANF block grant. The state has been assessed penalties for 2008 and 2009. They're $47 million and $113 million, respectively. The state is expected to continue to fail to meet its federal requirements in the future, and so it could be likely to receive additional federal penalties in future years, which may indeed be larger than those in 2008 and 2009. Turning to page 5 and the second topic, which is recent reductions in the CalWorks program. Your agenda has done a very good job of laying out the recent reductions in the program and the recent policy changes. We've provided a list summarizing the significant changes in the recent 3 recent years as well. Ongoing cuts in the program have reduced expenditures in the last 3 years by about $780 million. The significant changes that have been made to reduce those expenditures have been a total grant reduction of 12%, a shortening of the adult time limit from 60 months to 48 months, and a reduction in the earned income disregard. And in addition, several one-time reductions have been implemented over the past 3 years. In each of the last 3 years, the budget for, funding for employment services and childcare has been significantly reduced, as well as funding for intensive case management for pregnant and parenting teens and substance abuse and mental health treatment. Although those funds would be, under current law, would be scheduled to be reinstated in the budget year. As a result of the ongoing reductions, as I mentioned earlier, $780 million in ongoing reductions in the 3 recent years. Funding in the CalWORKs program has been relatively flat over the last 3 years, despite rising caseloads, mainly due to the recent recession. The final topic, which we show on page 6, is just providing some context on the current level of cash grants. Just as an example, the maximum aid payment for a family of 3 living in a high-cost county is currently $638 a month. When combined with average CalFresh benefits, food stamps benefits this family would receive, total resources for the family would be at about 72% of federal poverty level. The real value, or inflation-adjusted value of cash grants over the past decade have decreased significantly by almost a quarter between 2001 and 2011. Additionally, cash grants have decreased as a percentage of federal poverty level from 53% in 2001 to 41% in 2011. Largely, the nominal value, the actual dollar value of the grants is about the same between 2001 and 2011. The deterioration in the real value of the grants is mainly due to the suspension of cost of living adjustments during most of that period. Although the real value of cash grants has decreased during the past decade, California's cash grants are comparatively higher than most other states' TANF programs. As a percent of state median income, California cash grant is about 12% of state median income, which ranks 4th highest among all states in the country and 2nd highest among largest states. And this is about 3 percentage points above the national average. These are just a few background facts. They're certainly not comprehensive review of the information that's necessary to make a determination of the sufficiency of cash grants to meet a family's basic needs. That's certainly a complex question and one that we don't have an easy answer for today. Instead, we present some issues and questions that the legislature should consider when evaluating the sufficiency of cash grants. We list some questions on the last page in our handout. To summarize our guidance, we essentially suggest starting with an accounting of what the legislature feels are the expenditures necessary for a family to meet basic subsistence, meet its basic needs. And then balance that against the, not just CalWORKs grants, but also all of the resources that may be available to families, such as earned income or assistance from other public or private sources. And we would additionally suggest making allowances for differences in cost of living and resources available in different regions throughout the state, and evaluating how that might impact the ability of cash grants to help families meet their basic needs. And with that, I'll conclude, and unless members have any questions.
Members have any questions or comments? I just have to say, I know this is a personal issue, and I'll probably just have to get over it. But and we hear it, it's not just the LAO, we hear it constantly in terms of, evaluating our cash grant level against other states. And what irritates me about that is, this is California. And so we should only quote that statistic or make that reference if we're going to compare California against other states, against other costs like housing costs and some other fundamental costs that drive the cost of living in California sky high. So when we kind of pull out that data and say that it's one of the highest grant levels in the state, it just really feels to me out of context. And so I appreciate your comments on the following page where you talk about other issues that we have to take into consideration, and including categories of expenditures that fall within basic subsistence, like housing, and given the statistics Mr. Ansell shared in the first panel with regard to the just phenomenal increase in the number of homeless families in LA County. It brings us back to that point. Any other questions or comments of the LAO? Mr. Chesborough.
I guess I'd like to ask more or less the same question I asked previously. I'm really disappointed that it's focused almost exclusively on the short-term subsidy to keep people housed and fed, not on the transitional services that were designed in CalWORKs to help people not just achieve employment, but actually improve their potential income and lessen poverty. Do you have any comments, or did you spend any time looking at those, at the educational and training services and the potential impacts of the loss of those when people lose their benefits?
I guess I'd have to start by saying the information provided in our handout was essentially filling the request that had been made of the committee of the information to be provided. Are you asking for our?
I'm saying it's more than a monthly check that is being taken away from these folks.
Right.
So there's obviously an impact economically, both on them individually and the state, of not having people provided with services that can help them lift their income and become less dependent on government services. That's a pretty significant impact of the ratcheting down of the Caltrans program and proposals in this budget to do so.
That's true.
And so I just wanted to, it seemed like it should be part of the LAO's consideration in looking at what the impacts are.
So we certainly did make an evaluation of, say, the governor's proposal to reduce the time frame individuals would be allowed to access essentially the full array of welfare to work services, 24 months. And our assessment is somewhat mixed. We do recognize that there is some evidence that time limits can have a incentivizing effect on some individuals to encourage work participation. On the other hand, we recognize that there's also an equally likely chance that families will be moved into further destitution and further poverty, and will be unable to respond to those incentives that are created by a sort of time limit. So essentially, the effect is mixed and kind of a disparate effect on the CalWORKs population.
Would you agree that there would be a substantial difference in somebody who was forced off sooner without significant training or educational skills improvement versus somebody who completed a training or educational program in terms of their ability to attain self-sufficiency?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly true that an individual who has better human capital, better training, better education, is more ready to enter the labor force, would have a better chance of moving into work as opposed to further destitution once they've hit their time limit, yes.
Thank you. I would have welcomed that analysis in the LAO's analysis, but I appreciate you responding. Thanks.
We've been joined by Assemblyman Roger Dickinson. Thank you so much. And you have a question?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to join you for a little bit. And I wanted to actually take what Mr. Chesborough raised a step further, because what strikes me about the proposals we've seen are the potential here for essentially a cost shift from the state and federal government to local governments. Because to the extent that people don't have the availability of services required to make them work ready and to allow them to find employment, and rather become more destitute, as you said, become either homeless or barely hanging on to housing, unable to find food for themselves or to undertake other activities. It's the social safety net that is largely funded by local government to the extent that it exists, that it seems to me will have to step into the breach, and that's homeless services, that's food banks, that's general assistance, all those kinds of loosely knit together supports that are primarily locally funded. So my question is whether or not you have given any thought to trying to assess the extent to which the governor's proposal would actually result in a cost shift to to public and private sources at the local level to support those who otherwise we would support through CalWORKs.
Well, with respect to some of the kind of homeless assistance programs and food banks and some of the sort of nonprofit and private resources, I could certainly see some occurrence of increased demand on those services. As far as general assistance is concerned, it's my understanding that if any individuals were to be removed from CalWORKs as a result of the governor's proposal, the confluence of those cases would not be eligible for general assistance or general relief.
Right.
Mostly because the majority of the cases that would be removed under the governor's proposal would be ones that have earned income that is now higher than a threshold that's been lowered by some policy changes that the governor's proposed in his child maintenance program. So they do have some earned income that would likely make them ineligible for any sort of general relief or general assistance program.
But beyond that, you haven't considered doing any further analysis of what this might constitute in terms of a cost shift? And if you haven't, would you?
Yes, I mean it's not something that we've looked at this point. My initial reaction would be that the major cost shift that could occur, at least to local governments, would be if there were a shift into general assistance or general relief. Nonetheless, we could it's certainly a topic we could look at in terms of the shift to nonprofit or private or other public programs besides general relief.
Well, I think it comes in a number of different ways. It can come in increased need for police services. It can come in needs for attending to indigent health care. And there's a whole series of services and supports which you might not think about automatically, but could well come into a play for a family that becomes otherwise unable to support itself in any way besides homeless assistance services.
Right. I would probably have to caveat that in terms of the sort of kind of secondary effects that you referred to, such as increased need for police service, that would certainly be much harder or maybe impossible for us to quantify with any degree of certainty.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Mr. Nielsen.
There's some fairly significant change in how we're dealing with child care in this governor's proposal. Could you kind of walk through that a little bit? Child care, the administration?
Yeah. Are you referring to just child care in general or child care for CalWORKs recipients?
For CalWORKs specifically.
Before you start, because I know that was a real unfair question to ask, perhaps, because our child care hearing, we're going to do a joint hearing with SubCmte, so I'm not sure if you are the person with LAO that does the child care piece. So are you comfortable responding, or should we invite Mr. Nielsen to that hearing?
I can provide an introductory answer, I suppose, but yeah, it's true. I'm not our child care analyst. If you would prefer to defer the question to...
Okay, let's do that. She was supposed to be here today. She's home ill today. That hearing, Mr. Nielsen, is scheduled for March 14th. So, any other questions of the LAO? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. As the next panel comes up, Director Lightbourne from the Department of Social Services, thank you for accommodating the order in which we managed this hearing today. I thought it was very important, based on experience now running Sub-1, that we have some context, that we could hear from some recipients, some of the agencies who support recipients, the LAO analysis first. So then when you come up, we would have a context by which to ask you questions, as well as hopefully you would spend some of your time kind of responding to the things that you've also been privy to hearing as we have. Before you get started, let me introduce Chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, Bob Blumenfield. You have a few remarks you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, we have 60 subcommittee hearings scheduled before the May revise. I'm trying to stop in as many as I can. I've been watching them all from my office, and I wanted to come down. This is a really powerful hearing. And I just wanted to, when you're watching it on TV, you can sort of get a sense of it, but when you come into the room, you feel all the people who are here, who are up in the balcony. People have come from around the state, and when you watch that, you don't necessarily feel that. And I wanted to point that out to folks who are watching, because this, particularly the topics we're talking about today, are affecting the most vulnerable people in California, and how we deal with this is just critical to, not just to the numbers of the budget, but to people's lives. So I just wanted to recognize the people who are here, recognize you, Sub-Chair Ms. Mitchell, for your leadership and passion on this. I completely support your vision on this and any actions that you may take today, and I'm pleased that you're going through it so methodically, and just wanted to be here for a few minutes, and then I'm running back and forth to my office, but I'll be watching on TV as well as you go through it. So thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much for coming. Perfect timing that you're here to be a part of the presentation from the director, Mr. Lightbourne.
Good afternoon, Chair
Good
Mitchell,
afternoon.
committee members. Thank you. I'm Will Lightbourne from the California Department of Social Services. I'm joined by Todd Bland, our deputy.
Micah.
Come over this side. I'm joined by Todd Bland, our Deputy Director for Welfare to Work Services, and staff from the Department of Finance who
Thank
can
you.
help assist us. I'd like to thank committee and member staff for helping us arrange this hearing on what is in a number of ways a difficult proposal. It's difficult in that it is complex, which is understandable given it's a refashioning of almost the whole program, not just an across-the-board grant cut or services funding reduction. It has a number of moving elements, some parts of which are interactive with items that are not part of today's budget hearings. Others are sort of coming to light and requiring resolution as we have discussions with very informed stakeholders. And so I don't in any way want to pretend that we feel every imaginable question or eventuality has already been addressed in the proposal that is before you. We fully anticipate that it will be refined as conversations continue. I'd also like to just observe that the proposal does not assume any behavioral changes on the part of any participants. The problem with making behavioral change assumptions is that they're just that, they're assumptions, they're speculative, and to some degree they're manipulable. And you then get into a sort of a situation where, well, if you move this number high enough, you obscure other impacts. We thought it best not to suggest behavioral changes at this point, but to sort of allow it to be expressed absent that, not necessarily as worst-case impacts, but just as completely unvarnished with no attempt to diminish possibilities. And it's difficult, too, in that it's based on fiscal parameters that, to some extent, defy preferable alternatives. And I don't want to be obscure about that. What I'm going to do, with your permission, is highlight the proposed changes in the CalWorks Welfare to Work program, the proposed separate child maintenance program, then sort of touch on changes proposed for the CalLearn program, and briefly the WINS and WINS Plus components, which are part of the CalWorks agenda. And as Chair Mitchell observed a few minutes ago, the child care is a schedule for a different discussion, although it's referenced in the WINS Plus, so I'll make mention of it there. In terms of why we're proposing, why the governor's budget proposes a refocus of the CalWorks program, the observations have been made several times previously that over the past several years we've reduced resources for the counties while expanding exemptions for different families to the extent that we have now total reduced resources. We have exempted about 57,000 families. And although this was intended as a temporary solution for a short-term budget problem, we're left now with an under-resourced program. As observed by the LAO, we also have the paralleling problem of the state's work participation rate issues. As mentioned, we're approximately mid-20s. Our requirement is to reach 50%, and there are penalties which we're currently appealing, but which will continue to accumulate unless we start to address. Our goals of the refocusing, and I want to sort of start by saying I consider the program at its inception, I was also one of those in the room when it began.
Yes, you were.
To have been at its inception, at its core, and as originally created and funded, an outstanding success. Over time, however, we've lost some of the resources that we need to keep it in that form and that format. So our goal is to preserve the success of the current program. We know that the highest number of exits that participants have with earnings is in the first 2 years. Hence, our emphasis in a lot of this is to try to maximize engagement in that early period, to get people as quickly as possible into welfare to work activities. We want to make clear that there are incentives and bonuses for participating in work, and attach bonuses that continue even after the adult has exhausted the maximum possible time of adult assistance, even after 48 months. We want to be sure that some of that incentive continues to flow to their children so that there is a tangible reward. Recognizing the budget realities, we want to make the best possible use of the resources that we do have and better position the state for meeting the federal requirements. And additionally, we want to be sure that we continue a basic level of income and services for children whose parents are unable or haven't been able to make the transition to work, but embed that within a child well-being approach so that the state's compelling interest in the well-being of very poor children whose parents are otherwise without resources is maintained. To quickly overview the key pieces of the redesign, and the staff write-up is an extremely good summary, and I'm just going to highlight the basics. Within the Welfare to Work program, we propose essentially 2 tracks, the CalWorks Basic and the CalWorks Plus. The CalWorks Basic program, very similar to the current program, which provides up to 24 months of supportive services as well as income support to the adults and children while the parent is meeting the goals of their welfare to work plan. And we define it in terms of meeting the goals of their plan rather than any other particular benchmark. That aspect of the program focuses on barrier removal, job search, job readiness, work experience, vocational education, and subsidized employment opportunities. Post the 24-month service availability, the CalWorks Plus program comes into existence, or it can be within the 24 months, actually. Anyone who is meeting the work participation, fully meeting work participation requirement with employment is eligible to continue to receive the parent's portion of the grant up to the full 48 months now allowed under the existing program, and in addition, the earned income disregard is increased as that tangible incentive that continues even after the parent has passed the 48-month, so that that benefit continues to their children. Outside of the work-focused CalWorks program, then, we're proposing the creation of the Child Maintenance Program to provide basic level of income maintenance whose parents cannot work or have been unable to obtain work. It reduces the current requirement for quarterly reporting to an annual redetermination requirement.
This is child maintenance?
Child maintenance.
Okay.
To an annual redetermination requirement, but adds as an eligibility requirement that the child receive a well-child examination annually. In this way, there is assurance that the child's basic health and well-being needs are being met, and this would be sort of focus it within the concept of a child well-being program moving forward. As noted in the LAO's report, the total refocusing is estimated to produce state budget savings of $940 million, but that is based on what is called the workload budget, which presupposes first the restoration of the prior reduction of 370 plus million in the single allocation, and then reduces from the increased total. I just want to emphasize that. There's still obviously a sizable reduction in the program, both in the reduction to the child maintenance grant, as well as in the services funding. In the transition, just to clarify a little bit from what was said before, pretty much all of the transitions start either in October 2013 or 6 months after enactment, and then the creation of the CalWORKs Plus program is, as envisioned here, April 2014, April 12. October 12 is the starting place. April 13 is CalWORKs Plus, or depending on if enactment is past March, it just rolls forward. So the intention being that no one's transition would occur starting less than 12 months from the point of enactment, although that is not to in any way diminish the enormity of the tasks proposed or the complexity of it. Those are that we have to understand. Additional to the structural changes in the program, happy to answer detailed questions on it, the governor's proposal includes there are, under current law, certain households have been exempted from some prior grant reductions, and these exemptions would now be eliminated. So approximately 100,000 households would have those reductions that have been grandfathered would be removed. It's approximately $54 per month per affected household. Additionally, in the CalLearn program, the budget of 2011-12, SB 72, suspended the case management component for the CalLearn program. It maintains the services funding, the incentive funding, the bonuses, etc. The governor's proposal makes the assumption that, in fact, the CalLearn case management is eliminated going forward. But the bonus funding, the special funding for the teen parents is continued, and the provision of services is optional to the county within their basic CalWORKs program. In terms of the work incentive nutritional supplement program and the WINS Plus program, let me step back. The refocusing proposals in the CalWORKs Welfare to Work program that we've described up to this point don't in and of themselves increase the state's work participation rate yet. The expectation is that going forward they will set the stage for incremental steady increases there. In the shorter term, the approach to increase the WPR is both through the creation of the Work Incentive Nutrition Supplement Program, which has already been enacted, although its implementation has been delayed. Now we would move forward with implementation. This adds, as proposed, a $50 per month supplemental benefit at state general fund expense to those CalFresh, formerly food stamp recipients, who are not receiving CalWORKs assistance, but who are meeting work participation requirements. That way, the state can count them towards the state's work participation requirement. And the WINS Plus, which is not yet enacted but is proposed in the governor's budget, would add the same benefit to child care families receiving child care who do not receive CalWORKs assistance but do meet work participation requirements and are under 200% of poverty, therefore would meet TANF eligibility by giving them the additional $50 nutritional benefit monthly, we feel we can count them also towards the state's work participation requirement. Between the combination of the two, we sort of don't want to prejudge what we're going to find when we get there, but we're assuming that somewhere in the sort of low to mid-teens percentage increase is probably attainable. When the WINS WPR calculation was made, it was a couple of years back. There's since been caseload growth, which means that the denominator has changed a little bit. So the actual interplay between the number and the denominator, we're going to have to go back and refactor when we identify the exact number who become eligible. To conclude the presentation part of this, Chair Mitchell and committee members, I want to thank you for hearing our proposal. As I said at the beginning, I recognize that it's a difficult proposal in a number of ways. Given the cumulative impact of prior temporary fixes, the need to focus early in engagement for participants, I think, so as to help them secure labor market access is important. And the need to begin to address our work participation rate issue is also something that I don't think it is wise for us to defer. I realize that there's a lot of detail that has to be worked through, a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation has to occur. And I certainly hope we're going to have the chance to do that in the weeks ahead. But I hope that we don't defer dealing with that which ultimately we are going to have to address in a whole cloth fashion. Thank you very much.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Mr. Lightbourne and the team for helping walk us through this. And one of my concerns,
I think Mr. Lightbourne needs visuals.
Yeah.
Next time we need a chart because it's new language, they're new program names. It's, so pardon the interruption, but we need something to follow.
In addition to trying to accommodate the proposed cuts, we're also trying to understand reformulated programs. I think you described multiple moving parts. This is one of these program cuts include certain program reorganization. Writ large, the entire budget proposal, focusing on realignment, etc., confronts us with many moving parts in many programs. So I guess I have a couple of questions. One goes to, with the reorganization, have you calculated what additional administrative costs will be required to reorganize these programs that may ultimately take away from available resources for program implementation?
The budget proposal does a couple of things, Mr. Monning. First, it provides for some ramp-up funding for counties, recognizing, as Mr. Ansel I'll try to do my version of his visual, that there is an effect of rapid expansion that has to be met and followed by contraction, that there is funding to allow counties to try to accommodate that. Whether it's exactly the right amount or in the right spots, further conversation can be there. Secondly, there are provisions in this for automation-related resources, et cetera. It's not the goal to short the counties what it's going to take to do it. I wouldn't want to in any way say that our estimates branch and CWDA's fiscal people have yet agreed on numbers, and we're not there yet. But it's not the intent to short anyone. If we're going down this path, it's one that we've got to resource correctly. It would be a terrible disservice to do less.
Okay, thank you. And then more specifically on the child maintenance, to help me understand that proposal, a new requirement, while only annual qualification, there would be an annual well-child exam required with a penalty for families that don't comply. What would that penalty be?
The proposal is that this is actually an eligibility requirement. So in order for the family to continue in the child maintenance program, the well-child exam has to be documented. Now, counties, in the proposal, counties are given the room for good cause exemptions, either because of unavailability of medical services in a geographic proximity. And certainly one of the things as we move this forward that I would want to have us address is how can we actually do this from more of a pro motoris point of view and sort of how engage both health prevention activities to be sure that we're really making it possible and helping parents get their children to examinations if that's proving difficult.
So there's not is the penalty, do I understand, related to continued eligibility, or is there an actual fine or a reduction of benefit?
It's continued eligibility.
Just for the child that did not get the well child exam, that could not establish good cause, that would be the amount of the penalty. It's somewhat analogous, although not identical, to the current law immunization policy, where we expect the children to be immunized, and failure to immunize or meet those requirements, we remove the adult. There's a slight nuance here. If you were in the child maintenance program, there would be no aided adult, so that what would be happening, say there were two children in the family, the family failed to get the well child exam for one of the children, and they couldn't establish good cause, and time elapsed, then we would remove that child from the calculation. And so it works as a financial penalty, but we would continue aid for the other child.
Thank you. And then my final question, Madam Chair, and this goes to, as I read by changing eligibility based on income threshold, 84,000 children will be discontinued from any benefit due to income over the threshold. So as I interpret that, the parent is at a earning threshold over this limit, and so they're not eligible. We're going to lose 84,000 children who would have previously been eligible for some form of child care support?
If I could just clarify something, the change in the grant level, therefore the income limit that would make some people no longer eligible, only affects the CalWorks payment. It would not affect, when we say all benefits, CalFresh benefits would be unaffected, et cetera. So we're talking about the CalWorks.
So this is CalWorks, but it would still be income currently coming to as many as 84,000, income for the support of 84,000 children. Because of that changed threshold, they would no longer retain that eligibility for the CalWorks section of support.
Yes, sir. That is the result of if the 27% grant reduction were to occur.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
Let me just say before I open it up to other members' questions, I've received all the notes. I know that buses are leaving at 3:30, and so if you would kind of self-identify maybe, let's say, 10, 15 people who are going to be on the early buses who can begin to line up. And so we're going to do a slight adjustment and allow those folks who've traveled very far to be with us to do public comment early. So talk amongst yourselves, identify your 10 to 15 who can come up. So we'll make a slight adjustment to the agenda so we can hear from you. I know there's a county supervisor here. You can join that line since you also have to go. And then we'll, while you're doing that, we'll continue our questions, and then we'll bump the last panel if everybody's comfortable with that. Mr. Lightbourne, it's, I just have to say to you from my gut, every time I read the proposal again, or every time I have a conversation with you or someone about it, it feels less tenable to me than I felt during the prior conversation. I just have to say that. And one thing I heard today that I've not asked you or anybody about before, but it continues to ring every time I hear it, is this child well-being approach. And and help me, is there an underlying assumption that the children in these families, in this category, are at a greater level of risk? I mean, we're not have this well child approach in any other program that I'm aware of. What is that really about? What's the point? I don't get it.
If I could frame it this way, Chair Mitchell, there have been prior year budget proposals that have come before the legislature to eliminate the child-only caseload.
Correct.
Things like that. We feel very strongly that there is a compelling state interest, compelling reason based on well-being issues, on ensuring that there is a level of care and support for all children in the state, that we maintain this level of support. However,
but this proposal cuts it.
It reduces it. That is true. And that's part of the budget discussion which we'll have to continue going forward. However, increasingly, and this is necessary simply because we have the way the sort of the administrative funding for the program has changed over the last years. Increasingly, the case processing for child-only cases or cases with limited activity in them is more and more automated and remote. So there's no, although we have this compelling interest in the well-being of the children are not seen by county social workers, they're not seen by county eligibility workers, etc. To be sure that their needs are being met, we feel that if we require as eligibility an annual health examination for the kids, which ideally, I mean, it's part of the CDHP guidelines anyway. I mean, that's what children should be getting. It lets us assure that if there are any issues of concern, that it can be elevated within the existing local human service system.
And then what happens? If you identify a problem, then what?
Then services should flow to that child as appropriate, as necessary. And particularly as we're talking about younger children, I think the urgency of that is obvious.
You mentioned at the beginning of your testimony that it wasn't your expectation that we would change behavior.
It's not built into our assumptions, the numbers that you see.
But what it seems to me that we are assuming, given the new focus of the program, is that we have some influence on the economic realities in which we're all living. While I hear you say that it makes sense in the ideal economic climate, that services are delivered in an intense infusion in those first 2 years, that assumes we have influence over things we don't, like that there will be a job for someone to go to within those first 2 years. How do we balance that?
Currently, Chair Mitchell, when we look at the exempted population and look at those who are actually volunteering and participating and those who are actually meeting WPR, it's a surprisingly high number. I think it's about 40% of that exempted population are volunteering and working. It's not a requirement for them. And so the observation I'd make, and I don't want to stretch it too far because there are all sorts of obvious limitations to the extension of the thought. But the point would be that by not having it as an engagement requirement for that group as a whole, I think we are missing the opportunity to help them get access. Now, again, I don't want to overstate the extension of the logic.
And that may indeed be the case. I think what I have trouble with is the fact that we therefore cut people off. And while we may be currently missing the opportunity for this focused, targeted effort the first 2 years, you are now proposing that we cut people off in a climate where, as we heard in the first panel, the gentleman talking about the number of years, given his skill and background and service, that he has looked for work. That's troubling. I mean, I hear you that we may be missing opportunities now, but to cut people off, regardless of the success of their job search, is a problem.
As Mr. Matthews was testifying, I mean, I couldn't help but think that his life experience sort of points us to the fact that perhaps part of what we need to be doing is looking at how in the 24 to 48 months we find ways to sort of allow the combination of activities, but that include working as well as the other possibilities. And as we have this dialogue moving forward, my hope is that we sort of look for how we build on those strengths.
Well, we will be taking action today. I think it's important for this committee to send a real clear message to finance, to the department, in terms of where we stand. We will be taking action today, but we do fully intend to continue to have a dialogue. The challenge in proposing a policy shift of the complexity and magnitude as this one in the budget process is it does negatively impact our ability to have a dialogue and to build a policy and to build a program over time that works. I too was around during welfare reform as a young staffer, and we spent months in staff work groups.
Madam Chair, you're still young.
There was a thank you, Mr. Chesbrough, my friend. The subcommittee did, off hearing, not during the budget process, but hearings. I mean, the man and woman power hours spent to developing how California would implement welfare reform was just excessive. And, to say we want to have an ongoing process, to say we want to have to really work together to build and reshape this program on the budget time frame, when we have a legislative responsibility, obligation, reinforced by the voters of the state, that we pass a balanced on-time budget by June 15th, almost feels disingenuous. This is a major policy shift that's very complex, that has lots of moving parts, and that's coming from someone who's reading it nightly and had numerous conversations with you. My colleagues who aren't that close and intimate are going to have to figure it out too. It's a problem. And so we will continue to try to work to come up with a program that we feel is tenable and will work as we then move into May revise and are in a different, better position to look at the financial piece. Mr. Nielsen, did I see you send me a signal? No. Okay. Let me say that that's not 10 to 15 people. It is not. So I'm going to insert and help out a little bit. Because I'm going to cut it off. It's 3:24. So you're going to have to leave on the buses. So let me do this. If there are multiple representatives from the same group, identify one person. So parent voices, I see the blue T-shirts. You identify two people, period. You know I love you, but I'm running the committee. And you have a bus you need to get on. I'm going to ask everyone to cut their testimony down to 1 minute. So identify your person, everybody else step out of line so I can see how closer we are to 15 versus 30.
Okay, we're good.
I'm going to ask in your 1 minute that you not repeat what was been said by the previous person. What you need to testify, your testimony needs to be something different. And I need no more than two people from parent voices.
You got it. You got it.
Beautiful. Try to keep it to 1 minute. Those in the audience, if you want to show your support, you do your applause sign. Thank you very much to the department. Let's roll through this. We may have the department and finance come back if you have anything you want to add. I'm just trying to get people on their buses so they can get home to their families and children in time. 1 minute, first witness.
Thank you. Mary Ignatius with Parent Voices, over 1,000 signatures against these proposed cuts. And I just want to read a story that echoes what Mr. Matthews spoke about and the difficulty finding a job right now. My name is Lauren Freed from Parent Voices Marin. As you all scour through budget numbers, I thought I'd offer you some more numbers for your consideration. 365 days unemployed. Over 110 jobs applied for online, over 80 in person. Out of the 190 plus jobs applied for, I have only received 40 responses. Only 6 were called back for interviews, and 1 resulting in an offer for a part-time job that would require me to travel 2 to 3 hours a day and use a lot of those earnings towards transportation. Before I decided to go back to school, I was given 90 days of job search to find a job. When your children who are 5 and 8 come home from school and ask you, Mommy, did you find a job? Can we go back to after school care yet? It's sad because you realize how much it affects not only you but your children. Please imagine what that kind of rejection must feel like. The idea that parents simply need to be forced to work 30 hours because we just aren't doing it now isn't reality. Reality is employers aren't hiring people like me. Despite my 9 years of experience in the childcare field, owning a family childcare home, having an AA degree, it's the fact that a vocational degree and even an AA are not enough in these economically tough times.
15 seconds.
They've told me that the reason why I haven't gotten a job is because of not having enough education. I'm asking you to reject the cuts to child care and CalWorks. These programs have been cut to the bone. We know the governor has proposed a rainy day fund of $1.1 billion. I'm here to tell you it's raining now. Our umbrellas are broken. Our brain boots have holes in them. Use this funding to fund these critical safety net programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Yes, hi, my name is Junebug, and I'm with Parent Voices, the San Francisco chapter. I have 2 dependent children, and I'm on CalWorks. And even though I have a resume that's more than 2 pages long, I still don't earn a living wage, and though I'm responsible for caring for a very young age. I live in a government that denies me my basic rights, and this government should be ashamed. Preventive support is key in helping my family, who is struggling every day to turn pennies into gold because poverty bought my lottery ticket. I am a serial number, and domestic violence took my breath. I am mentally challenged, but love for my children gives me courage to make a constant effort to eradicate the poverty in my family's life. CalWorks should be designed to work for us, not against us. We, the people, the welfare recipients, work really hard and still have a hard time. Hard work is not only paid employment. Hard work is college and mental and domestic violence therapy, looking for and maintaining employment. To put a condition that one can only qualify for stage 1 child care if they are employed is a setup. I am here to upset that setup. Without that child care support for my son, I would not have gotten an early child education certificate, and I would not have gotten the help that I needed to build emotional intelligence to help me survive through a trauma that I experienced. I just want to say that child care keeps Californians learning and earning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Good afternoon, Assembly members. I am Vivian Thorpe from Berkeley, California, and single mother of 3, former CalWorks participant who is here today to talk to you about how CalWorks was the key to a better life for me and my children after years of struggle with homelessness, loss of a family member, and economic hardship. CalWorks has been integral to my self-sufficiency, for without it I would not be where I am in my life today, having the sole ability to support my family. It has also been instrumental in enabling me the true opportunity to seek formal education as my vocational training plan and earn my bachelor's degree so that I was able to compete in the job market for a career, not just a job that supports my family. Presently, I'm working as a legal advocate at the Homeless Action Center in Berkeley, California, giving back to my community through my advocacy work, helping others with public assistance resources with my caseload rapidly increasing daily, and that's with Alameda County. I would not be here today without CalWorks. I would not be speaking to you, and I am glad to tell you I'm no longer living in poverty with my children. Budget cuts to the CalWorks program will adversely impact families like mine. Therefore, it is imperative that no cuts be made to CalWorks, a program that enabled me to have access to basic needs such as health care and food, but also educational job training that got me out of poverty. I am definite proof that CalWorks works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Sherry Hill. I'm a current recipient and volunteer at the Alameda Food Bank. And I just like to say that we give out a sufficient amount of food each week. And with these budget cuts or whatever is going to be cut, we might not be able to make for the people that we have now and the future people that's coming. And also the people that's going to be cut, like the casework that may be cut out for CalWorks, may need to come to the Alameda Food Bank. Don't let them forget that.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Marino, and I am a single mother and CalWorks recipient. And I'm also very proud to say that I'm currently a junior at Cal State Long Beach University, which is something I never, I never thought I would see happen. But
it's okay.
I can't. I'm sorry.
You can submit your testimony in writing, and we appreciate you being here. Next witness, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Iverson. I'm with 9 to 5. I've suffered domestic violence. I dealt with it. Went to counseling through CalWorks. They suggested that I go to apply for SSI.
Social Security.
Instead, I went back getting my GED, getting my automotive skills, and you guys are going to cut it. You guys want to take back what I was exempt for, add it to what you guys want to take the exemption that I have and put it towards my time on welfare. Welfare has helped me. I used to work. I had to quit my job because of domestic violence. Anyway, me and my kids are suffering. So that's all I got to say.
I appreciate your testimony today. Thank you for coming. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm with 9 to 5. I just want to say that if you cut CalWorks, then me and my son are going to have nowhere to live, and I know that's the same with everybody else, but my parents, we can't live at their house because they don't have no money. They don't have no work. They have all this money to build a Niner Stadium, which, I mean, come on now. I'm going to end up living at the Niner Stadium with my son because we have nowhere to live. So I came a long way. I don't have a baby's dad because he's not here no more. So it's not like I have someone to sit there and take care of me. So I've been going to school and I've been doing what I need to do. And I just got out of rehab 8 months ago. I've been working really hard. I can't have that get cut. So I hope you guys don't cut it.
I appreciate your testimony.
I mean, just put yourself in our shoes before you cut something, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next witness.
Hi, my name is Laura Mercedes Ceja. I'm with 9 to 5. Sorry. I have a daughter who's barely 11 months. She just turned it. You know, I'm a single mom. Her dad left, and we had no one. So if you cut this, I'm gonna be homeless. I'm only getting like $500, and I have to pay bills for food, diapers. And if you cut it, basically, we'll be homeless, and I won't only have to pay the rent. So I have nothing to give to her. So basically, my daughter homeless, and basically millions of people who depends on the program. And I know tons of them because they've been in relationships who are violent. Been neglected by their families.
10 seconds.
And, well, you know, a lot of people depend on it. I depend on it. My mom has disability. She's disabled. She can't do anything. She can't help me. She has to take medication. I have to go buy it for her because she can't work. So think about it. If you were in my place, what would you do? To get a job. I'm doing what I need to do to get CalWorks. But I can't find a job just because sometimes of my race or
5 seconds.
I have no work experience. And that's what I'm doing. I'm working to have my own restaurant one day. And I'm studying culinary arts. So
thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate you. Next witness, please.
Hi, I was here in November, and you said, like you said out in the rally, if we want to be heard, we need to come back. So today I'm back, and it really disturbs me about the 2-year. And so I brought something. I've been in CalWorks starting fall of 2008 and attending the Santa Rosa Junior College. And there's a lot of cuts to the community colleges at this point. So this is my certificate, December of 2011. These are my 2 degrees that I've earned, also December of 2011. No more could I get my certificate before I got my degrees. Cutting the program at any other point would have been detrimental to me. I put in 68 hours a week on my welfare to work plan with a plan that says single parents should be about 32 hours a week. I would really like for you guys to consider this.
10
there's
seconds.
A lot of students who go through this who are in the same boat. And I just want you to see, even with part-time work, I've just started a business and am getting off CalWorks, and I hope to get back. So, and it wouldn't have happened without all this help.
Thank you very much. Next witness. 1 minute.
Hi, my name is Nikisha Tucker. I'm with Women Empowerment, and I am a mother of 3 children, ages 11, 5, and 4. I'm a vet. I worked for United States Navy. I worked as an administrative assistant for large companies for over 10 years. And right now, I had subject to domestic violence as well as family violence to a point where now me and my children are homeless. I am doing everything on the actual requirement list to make sure that I'm still compliant to CalWORKs. And unfortunately, at this moment, with all of my degrees and well as my training and my experience, I'm still unable to find a job. So to cut out the program
10 seconds.
will only just make it worse for people like myself as well as other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Hello, my name is Candace, and I'm representing Women's Empowerment as well. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and I will agree that as Californians, we are all facing a disturbing economy. The cuts are being made across the board, but the cuts to CalWORKs are the ones that we cannot afford. The results will be devastating. While saving money in one area, the amounts needed to fight crime and to provide mental health services will rise. The number of child abuse and child molestation cases will rise. The numbers of uneducated youth will rise. The numbers of a drug-infested society will rise. The numbers of homeless families with children will rise. And with all these rises, are we really willing to make those proposed cuts? If these cuts are made, and what we would like to request, if those cuts are made, please change the name of CalWORKs to CalKills, because that's what it will do to Californians.
Thank you very much. The last witness is going to be the gentleman in the gray suit. That's number 15. You, sir. Yes.
Okay, maybe I can give my minutes to some of them. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Margaret Mack. I'm president of Black Women Organized for Political Action, the Sacramento chapter. I'm here on behalf of BWAPA, as we call it, and to give written testimony, so I won't take up everybody's time, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Last witness. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Don Saylor. I'm here to speak on behalf of the California the county, let's see, what in the world is it? It's CSAC. It's all those county supervisors. There are about 300 of us.
Got you.
Thank you. I'm a Yolo County supervisor.
Thank you.
I represent just the area right over here. I think it's no coincidence that the line of speakers who came before you today are virtually all women, because 92% of the households who are CalWORKs participants are headed by females. 3/4 of the people in those who are beneficiaries in California are children. In Yolo County, there are 4,500 individuals who receive CalWORKs benefits and who participate to their fullest, and 3,300 of those are children. Mm-hmm. We are talking about a society that is throwing away our children. Mm-hmm. The language that we have in these discussions will be often referring to things like hard choices. Mm-hmm. This is not a hard choice. It's an easy target. Mm-hmm. I'm here to speak on behalf of county supervisors, but there's somebody else that I'm really speaking on behalf of, and that's Karen Saylor, who is my mother, who gave birth to a child when she was a teenager, and that child is before you, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't appreciate the privilege that I have to be here to speak to you in this room. Mm-hmm. This is not a savings. This is over $1 billion reduction in essential aid for cash payments. In Yolo County, for a family of 3 with a mother and 2 children, that's currently $608 a month. Just think of what that is. Mm-hmm. And after these changes go into effect, that's going to be about $330 a month. Mm-hmm. Just think what that is and how much any one of us spends on lunch in the course of a month's time. That's for 3 people. Mm-hmm. Currently in Yolo County, we have a 13% unemployment. As we talk about job readiness and making sure these people go to work, where in the heck are they going to go to work? We've got work to do just to make jobs for the whole society. 50% of the children in Yolo County receive free and reduced lunch programs. Almost 15% of our children qualify fit underneath the federal poverty level. This is not a hard choice. It's an easy target. The hard choice is when the mom has to decide what kind of food she's going to give her kid. That's a hard choice. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of county supervisors, and I'll tell you that we're certainly concerned at a county level about what will happen with homelessness, with child welfare services, and with the shift of costs from the state to the county, and this and many, many other programs. But I'll tell you what's more important than that. It's that most of those children and mothers who don't receive aid after these program changes go into effect, they have no cost shift. There's no place that they're going to find a resource. So thank you very much for your time, for your compassion, and your careful consideration.
Mr. Supervisor, if you wouldn't mind, I posed a question to Mr.